I don't want to be known as the transition person who did something before. If you're going to kind of examine the two parts of my life, I was a cyclist before and now I'm not. And it's okay to refer to both of them, but I'm not, one didn't cause the other.
This guy says the most crass thing that any human could utter, and completely illogical, irrational.
And remember,
beyond stupid.
And his wife sank down in the chair.
She sank. I felt it would be Pippa's opportunity to tell her story, because many people had tried to tell her story in the past, and with varying results.
On this episode of the William Hill Sports Book Club, we're taking a look at a brilliant book about cycling, but it is so much more than that. It's called The Escape, it's subtitled The Tour, The Cyclist and Me, and it's co-written by Pippa York. Robert Miller was king of the mountains in the 1980s, a brilliant cyclist, but after transitioning, she has now lived as Pippa York for over 2 decades. It's a book written in a brilliant way. And co-writing the book is the journalist whose work led to the takedown of Lance Armstrong, one of the finest sports writers around, David Walsh. It's the William Hill Sports Book Club, and this is The Escape by Pippa York and David Walsh. Hi there, I'm Adrian Durham. This is the William Hill Sports Book Club, and there have been millions and millions of books written over the years, of course. I've read a tiny fraction of them, which is actually quite a lot, but I've never read anything quite like this. This book is about the Tour de France. It's about some of the cyclists in the modern era. There's some Lance Armstrong in there, there's some David Walsh in there, lots of Robert Miller and lots of Pippa York as well. A huge amount of humour in there too. There's insight on doping, insight on cycling, plus detail and emotion on transitioning, on the surgical realities of transitioning, and the horrific way some of the press reported it as well. Robert Miller was king of the mountains at the 1984 Tour de France, finishing 4th overall. Pippa York now reports on the tour, which is ironic as Robert Miller wasn't exactly media friendly back in the day. Pippa York, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming and joining us. David Walsh, chief sports writer at the Sunday Times. Ask anyone in this industry, we all have nothing but respect for this guy. David, how you doing?
Well, thank you.
Great to have you with us as well. Listen, there's a lot to get into. We have some legends in the room with us. We are in the presence of greatness. And then there's Neil Foggin from William Hill as well. How you doing?
Thank you for that.
That's all right. Just like to introduce you properly. You've read tons of sports books. What, in your view, makes The Escape so special?
It's a special book. It's definitely a special book. These books don't come along very often, and it's got everything. It's got emotion, it's got tears. But the beauty of this one, sometimes sports books can be very, very deep and very dark and emotion. But this has got light and this has got laughter in it. And the humour which comes through is just brilliant. It's very well written, and it's that book. I always look for the book which you could give to your mum and say, read that. And my mum doesn't like sport. And she would read that and go, that's a great book. And that's what you're aiming for with this prize. And this one, I think, is up there. Yeah,
it's hilarious. There's no doubt about that. I think that one of the things that, for me, makes this book so special is the dynamic between you two in the book. Some of the conversations these two have while they're following the Tour de France, driving around France, are hilarious. They're actually transcribed in the book as well. You're going from stage to stage of the tour. It's fascinating, it's hilarious as well. Very moving at times. The suspense of whether the next hotel is going to be any good is always gripping. Whether it's even going to be open, it's always gripping. We think there's a future for this, don't we? That maybe a TV show. I don't know if anybody's come forward to. Have you pitched it to anybody?
No, not yet.
It's got to happen, hasn't it?
Well, are we going to be in the jungle? Are we?
Would you do that?
Only, but with I'd have to choose the guests.
Right, I don't think they allow that. But listen, let's wait and see on the TV show. I think that could be really good. But Pippa, congratulations on the book. It is fantastic. I loved it. Why did you want to bring out a book like this?
I'm not sure I wanted to. I think we can blame David for how this happened. It was kind of his idea. With his Irish charm, I got sucked into it.
It's all his fault.
Yeah.
It's usually always his fault.
But wouldn't it, I think it would be true, Pippa, and not speaking for you, but I saw it as an opportunity to do something I knew would be fun. And from Pippa's point of view, I felt it would be Pippa's opportunity to tell her story, because many people had tried to tell her story in the past, and with varying results.
Yeah, I mean, there was another book which we'll talk about a little bit later on, but I'm going to come clean, first of all. Back in the 80s, I was a proper Robert Miller fanboy. I loved cycling. I used to race home from school to watch. So I need to put that out there first of all. I love the Tour de France. There was no greater sight than Robert Miller flying down a mountain. And it's the documentary, The High Life, that was made in the 80s, there's a scene in that where you're flying down a mountain and hurtling down. It's obviously done for the cameras, but this is how you...
No, it wasn't done for the cameras. Was it called the Durham, the descent through the tunnels?
Right, yeah.
And the car comes?
Yeah, the car comes head on. I mean, it's kamikaze stuff.
The road wasn't closed, the road was open.
Right.
It's just a training ride.
Well, you're not scared?
No.
It's sensational stuff. It's on YouTube, so I recommend people watch it. High adrenaline stuff as well. And the other thing is, Robert Miller made mountain climbing look easy. And at the time, I have to say, I thought it was. And then I got on a bike and tried to ride up a hill, and it's really not easy. So how did Robert Miller make that look easy?
I was lucky I had a talent for it, and I developed that talent to 100% of its possibilities. So that's why I was so good at it. So that was my kind of natural gift, and I made sure I could do it to the kind of the best way possible.
One of the things I also loved about Robert Miller was the fact that he was so aloof with reporters, almost rude. I actually liked it, and then I got into the industry and realised, oh, that must have been tough. So, I mean, you described, David, and covering the tour at the time, you described Robert Miller as a bit cranky. You even admit you were afraid to approach him. That's on page 272. A couple of questions for you, David. First, were you dubious about spending so much time with Pippa York in the writing of this book, bearing in mind what you'd known about Robert Miller? No,
I wasn't. I didn't get to know Robert Miller because Robert Miller wouldn't allow you to get to know him. You know, I remember a few times going to the car where Robert Miller would have been outside, and like you, Adrian, I had exactly the same feeling about Robert Miller climbing a mountain. I thought, you know, there are climbers and then there are special climbers. And Robert Miller going up the biggest mountains just looks so good on the bike. And you thought, this is a really special talent. I would still, even though Chris Froome won the Tour de France 4 times, I would regard Robert Miller as the greatest British climber I have ever seen. And I loved what Robert Miller did. But I remember approaching Robert Miller once, and I think the journalist in front of me was just maybe a couple of yards in front of me, and I heard... and I thought, I'm giving up my place in the queue here.
Anything to say, Pippa?
No, probably. You know, you're probably best to go back to the car and pretend that you'd forgotten something.
But I presume it's very different spending time with Pippa York now than it was trying to spend time with Robert Miller then.
Totally. Yeah. I went and interviewed Pippa before the 2020 tour, and we met, you know, down in some little kind of forested area near the New Forest, and we sat down on a lovely kind of summer's day, and I found Pippa really open, interesting, and I went and I wrote up the piece for the Sunday Times, and it struck me that I was going on the tour that year. The guys that I travelled with previously they weren't going on this tour. I was going to be travelling on my own, and I thought, I wonder, would Pippa think about coming on the tour? So I called up Pippa and said, any chance you'd be interested in coming on the tour? And she said she would think about it, or maybe she said immediately she would, but she did. And here's the interesting thing. I'd been going on the tour since 1982, and now we're talking about 2020, which is whatever, 38 years. And I didn't go every year, I meant maybe 30 years out of 38. But I had a battalion of people I traveled with, people I got on, you know, reasonably well with, very well with. Many of them are still good friends. Halfway through my first tour with Pippa, I realized that actually this is more fun than I've had with anybody I've ever traveled with previously. And that really did surprise me. I couldn't believe, and the key to it was Pippa is incredibly patient and incredibly tolerant. And she's about the only person who didn't complain all the time about all my various weaknesses, my bad timekeeping, my too much talk, my annoying behavior. So Pippa just was able to deal with it better than anybody was. And because of our patience, we got on great.
Okay, but it's really interesting because I wonder if that's the difference between transitioning, going from being a man to being a woman. So being Robert Miller wasn't easy for you because you weren't comfortable being Robert Miller. Transitioning brought challenges, obviously, but as Pippa York, as a woman, I think you've said in the book, you're obviously much happier. There's a 95% happiness going on there, which wasn't happening before. And it becomes very clear that you're much happier than Robert Miller was. Is it as simple as that? You've become the person you should have been all along? I'm
not in the competition sphere, so I don't have to deal with all that kind of manly world of, you know, what I've got is bigger, faster, stronger, whatever than you've got. And in the female world, it's more about cooperation. So you learn how the kind of social skills that allows you as a woman to kind of navigate in a man's world, and you say the right things, and you know, because a man is always trying to fix you or help you because they have to take charge. So you let them do that, and they're contented, and you just accept your fate.
But as Robert Miller wasn't doing that.
Robert Miller would have told David
to go away.
I would have said, you know, so me as a bike rider, when anybody asked what I wanted, I told them I didn't expect any more or any less. So if they did less, they got a and if they did more, they got a
do as you're told.
So it was as simple as that. You know, I didn't need anything else. So if they asked, what do you want? I would say, this is what I need. This is it. Exactly. And I at first I never said, don't change anything. So you would get people who would add to your request, or people who would think you would put up with 90% of your request. And as I moved up the kind of hierarchy in the team, my wants and requests and things didn't get any more ridiculous than they were at the start. They stayed the same, but I was allowed to express myself a bit more. Probably quite rudely.
We'll explore this a little bit more later, but are men actually that bad in your experience of the world?
No, they're not bad. It's just a different thing. It's a different world. It's a different set of expectations. And so the social skills you need in the men's world are very different to the female world.
Okay.
So the easiest thing is you're walking down the street and you see a man coming towards you as a female.
Yeah.
And they smile at you and you have to smile back, otherwise they go, oh, don't be grumpy. And if it was in the man's world and you're walking down the street and a man smiles at you, you know, you guys don't smile at each other.
We look at the ground, yeah.
None of them are watching. You know, you do all the kind of things to avoid eye contact, whereas women look at each other and we'll smile, even though we don't know what we're smiling about. It's just a kind of acceptance that we're in that same position.
These things are alluded to in the book regularly, and I think they're instructive, educational as well. I think there's a lot we could learn in reading the book. And on page 180 of the book, there's a photographer who doesn't accept that you're not Robert Miller anymore. I think that's the case. Yeah. Top of page 90, you say in one of the conversations in the book between you and David, anything that's different from their lives disturbs them. And I mean, I'm closing the book there and thinking about that for a good few hours, because I think it's a powerful thing to say, and I can understand what you're saying as well. But this photographer who couldn't accept that you're not Robert Miller anymore, what's that about? What's going on there?
I don't know. You'd have to ask them. Because
I asked him, because I know this photographer, and I said, how could you do that? Pippa is now Pippa. And what he said was, I knew him as Robert Miller, and he will always be Robert Miller to me. And I just thought, complete asshole. And I felt really kind of angry towards this guy, and now I wasn't going to start a fight, but I was incandescent. I was like the big brother of the little sister who'd been abused by somebody, or verbally abused, and I wanted to kind of take, but I felt you're just talking with a complete lack of tolerance. Somebody who can say, Pippa is now Pippa, and I've just got to row in with that. It doesn't hurt me to row in with that. It doesn't lessen my life in any way, but he couldn't do it.
It's not his reality.
No, well, I don't understand how he feels he's got the power to make that judgment as well. It's not.
Well, it's his judgment, but that's all it is.
Yeah.
So he's one of those people that don't believe that you can change. So he's stuck in that world of this is what, but this all happened in front of other people. I wasn't talking to him. He interrupted. I was talking to this couple, and they were appalled, and I just let them get on with it because it wouldn't have been the first time.
So did it not upset you, or?
It upset me that he did it. It upset me more that the people had to defend me, because I'd become kind of used to that, and that sometimes people would do that to you. So I was kind of more upset for the people that they had to kind of stand up for me. But the strange thing was that afterwards he wanted me to go and do this event for him. And it's like,
what?
What?
Yeah.
That'd be a big no.
It's like, I'll send you an email. I thought, okay.
That's extraordinary.
Go ahead.
This is the nature of the book. It will make you laugh. It will make you cry as well. Pippa York and David Walsh are with us discussing their book, The Escape, on the William Hill Sports Book Club. It's the William Hill Sports Book Club. We're discussing The Escape with Pippa York and David Walsh, who wrote it, and it's wonderfully written. Pippa's description of the Tour de France early in the book is perfect. If you go to page 5, it's one of the most beautiful pieces of madness, she writes. An epic in an age that doesn't do epics anymore, a race that's flawed and fascinating, human and inhuman, a race that lasts too long and ends too soon. David, we all know you can write. Were you surprised at just how good it was writing with Pippa, the magical way with words she has as well?
Yeah, absolutely. But I knew that from Pippa's writing and, her cycling writing. It appears regularly on Cycling News, the cycling website, and Pippa can write and Pippa can think, and that was something that really made the journey of being on the tour together more entertaining. I mean, I remember we were driving into Lourdes, and I'm saying to Pippa, as a Catholic, like my family have brought sick people to Lourdes. My mother went to Lourdes when she was unwell, and I'm saying this is like a place of great kind of belief and worship and faith, and I wanted Pippa to come with me to the grotto, just to go and visit it. And Pippa said, I've been coming to Lourdes as a cyclist for a lot of years. When I was like in the Tour de France, you'd often stay at Lourdes or you go through Lourdes. And he said, the thing I noticed is there are as many pharmacies on the corners of the streets in Lourdes as there is in any city in France that I've ever been to. Why is that if you've got all these miracles going on? And this Irish Catholic didn't have an answer.
That's a genius observation, no doubt about it. We do have a big question. You've got a big question about the book because there's a lot of words in it, but...
There's no pictures. How come there's no photographs in the book?
We didn't do photos, did we?
Didn't do photos.
We're not photogenic.
Yeah.
Is that a conscious decision, publisher ask, or...?
He asked me for photos, but I don't really do photos. I have this kind of thing. I've never run the camera until cameras appeared on phones. So any kind of memories that I need that I've seen, I store in my head. So I don't need a kind of album of photos to...
I'm going to let you into a secret. If you Google image Robert Miller or Pippa York, there's a lot of images out there.
Yeah, but they're not my images.
Right. It's got to be your image.
No, it's the images I keep aren't of me. They're of things I see and of people I encounter, of situations. But I don't take pictures just to sit and look at them. I'll look at them once and I'll store that information, and if it's worth remembering, I'll remember it.
One thing I would say is, and before I did this show, I always used to go straight to the photos. It's now the last thing I do. I'll remember, there's photos in the middle, I'll go and have a look. So it didn't occur to me until you'd said to me, there's no photos in it. I was like, okay, I haven't really noticed that. It doesn't need photos, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Absolutely
No,
not.
and the thing, I'm ashamed to admit this, right? When you said there are no photographs, I'm thinking, what's he talking about? I mean, of course I know there's no photographs, but I never noticed that there were no photographs. And I think I'm a bit on Pippa's side here. I'm not one for photographic memories, but I love to recall moments or stories that I've heard and lines that I've read. Maybe it's just more of a words person than an images person. But no, it's true, there are no photographs. But I don't think the book suffers in any way.
No, I don't. And I think when I was reading it, and particularly with the conversations you two have in the car together, because they're so funny, most of them, or so meaningful, most of them, you know, you're kind of really in that moment as you're reading them. But I do picture Pippa York next to Chris O'Dowd, forgive me, sitting in the car talking with each other. For those that don't know, Chris O'Dowd played David Walsh in the film The Programme. And it's a very, very good likeness as well, as you can see. So that was my image I had. I didn't need any photographs in the book to give that image to me. It was part of my own kind of movie, if you like, playing out as I was reading the book, and it really worked. And the words are really powerful. I mean, you're not a bad writer, David, I have to say. Page 262, you give a superb description of a road on the tour. If I could read it out, it says, a murderously steep climb with gradients so uneven that they first break a climber's rhythm, then his heart. It's like, I mean, I'm purring at that. That's absolutely superb. And there's one other from the many examples I'll give here. I won't read the whole thing, but it's 276, 277, those pages. It's a perfect description of how Robert Miller used to ride, and you use the word jouncing, which I love. 70 kilometres per hour, jouncing over cracks, bumps, craters and potholes. I mean, what a criminally underused word jouncing is, and it's perfect for the tour, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, it's sensationally good writing, and that's something you picked up on as well, the brilliant writing. I think it was when Pippa's at Bangkok airport, that was the bit that you particularly loved.
Yeah, because I just found it really moving. It's beautiful, and it's moving, and it's also simple. And that's not disrespectful, I just found it, and I just sat there, and I had to stop reading because I had to take it in, have a moment, take it on, and I thought, yes, this is right. This feels good. This feels someone at peace and happiness. And I think it's beautiful. And I think all the way through the book, but again, back to the photos, when you're reading the book, you do have these images. And all I kept thinking was, we've watched a lot of TV shows where there's two people, normally celebrities, that go off and do these journeys. And then I just thought, I just want to see these two in a car. Or I want to see these two turning up in a restaurant. What was it? The Mexican restaurant, which only had pizza because it's late at night and stuff like that. And I just found it really it's moving because of the story and it's someone's life, but then you've got the laughter of friendship, and I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, it is. And I'm actually thinking in my head now, if they make the book into a movie, does Chris O'Dowd play you? And then we're going down a whole different road. I mean, you're right. It's very funny, the conversations. It made me laugh out loud in many places. One of the early stories in the book is of the sat-nav voice, which is absolutely hilarious. I mean, I'm not going to spoil it. I don't want to give everything out on this show. People have got to go and read the book. It is genuinely laugh out loud hilarious. And there's a bit that made me cheer out loud as well. And we need to talk about Cavendish, Mark Cavendish, page 107, 108. There's a lot of love for Mark Cavendish. He's my absolute, no disrespect, all-time favourite cyclist. He's in the mix as one of my favourite sports people of all time. What do you love about Mark?
I love that when he comes to the interview after the race and he's won and he's up there and somebody asks a question, he just doesn't blurt out a statement. He's learned to say. He takes probably 5-10 seconds to think about it, and then he gives you an answer. And it's never a yes or a no like they would have got from me. You know, it's always an explanation of the moment, how he felt, how he kind of manipulated the whole thing, and how he saw it all happen. And his answers would last 2-3 minutes sometimes.
Yes. There's one thing Mark Cavendish said, didn't say it to me, but said it somewhere, maybe in his documentary or something, and he said it subsequently because it's such a strong thing to say. He said, I gave my life to cycling, and cycling gave me the life that I've had. And I just thought that so encapsulates his relationship with cycling. And he said something once to me. I interviewed him about 2 years ago or 3 years ago during the winter training camp. And he said he was reflecting on his life and how when things went wrong, they went really wrong. He got a virus, he had mental health issues, and basically for about 2-3 years, he wasn't getting picked for the Tour de France team, and his life was a mess. And he said, I reflected back on that period. And he said, what struck me was that when I was young and I was winning 4 stages of the Tour de France, and the following year 3 stages, and the following year 4 stages, I had a lot of people around me, and no matter what I asked, they said yes. And he said there were a few people who said no. And when things went wrong in my life and I looked round, he said all the people who were saying yes had gone. The people who were saying no were still there. And I thought that's such a powerful, he was thinking very much of his wife, who was saying no to some of the things he was suggesting he should do or could do. And when all the yes people had vanished because Mark was no longer the king, the people, he said, who were saying no, they were still around. And not many people are that perceptive. And Pip is absolutely right. You can't ask Mark a question and get a glib answer, because as glib as the question might be, the answer will never be glib.
No. So no. He has a perspective of life outside of just competition. And that's quite rare in a top sports person, because they're usually just so focused. But somehow he manages to see the rest of life as well going on. So he'll notice things outside of what he needs to do. He'll also kind of take in parts. So his perception of life is very different to the normal kind of successful sports person.
And I just loved Mark Cavendish for that moment at I think it was the 2020 tour, COVID tour, and I'm watching this from a distance. The time trial's over, and Mark's done the time trial. He's not going to win the time trial, so he doesn't overextend himself. But it's maybe we were in Laval, and it was a really misty day, kind of wet.
It was wet,
and it was grey, and it was horrible, and it was absolutely imperative that a journalist never physically touched a rider because of COVID. We had to wear masks if we were talking to them. They had to wear masks if they were talking to us. And Mark Cavendish came around the corner, and because it was raining, this is beyond the finish area, there weren't that many people around. But Pippa was down by the barrier. I could see her. And I could see Mark Cavendish going on the bike, and I can see his head turning, and he sees Pippa. And he just goes straight over, right? He's got no mask. Pippa's not wearing her mask. And Mark just devours her in this bear hug, ignoring all the protocols. And I said to Pippa afterwards, I've seen Mark Cavendish, greet his teammate who's just led out the sprint when Mark has won, react like that, but not to a journalist standing on the other side of the barriers. Why? And Pippa basically said, well, when things weren't good for Mark, I was one of the people who was still in touch with him, who was still encouraging him, who was still reminding him of how good he was. And Mark was never going to forget that. No,
it is one of the most beautiful moments in the book. It's a really emotional moment. If you read that and you don't wobble a little bit, then you're way too hard-boiled for me. I did interview Mark Cavendish once on talkSPORT, and one of my questions to him was, I struggle up every slight incline on a bicycle. How hard is it to ride uphill? Because obviously he's a sprinter, but part of the job is riding uphill as well. And he just gave out this huge sigh and said, I have no idea how people do it. Is there a secret?
No, it's what we have as a talent. I have no idea how he does what he does.
Right.
So what he does is you can't learn it. You can't teach it. It's the guys at his level and the girls, who you get women at that level as well that are so dominant. That's an innate thing that they have and they've developed. And you know, for Mark, he's the way he would deal with a sprint and manipulate the whole kind of situation, which is incredible sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, he said it doesn't get any easier, and that's probably when I gave up cycling at that point. If it's not going to get any easier, I'm not signing up for it. And just very quickly, both of you, is he the greatest British cyclist of all time? Yeah,
definitely.
Even though others have won the Tour de France?
He's way above them. The others have been part of a system, but there isn't a system to do what he does.
OK, we'll take that, absolutely. It's the William Hill Sports Book Club. Pippa York, David Walsh, they're with us discussing The Escape, the Tour, the Cyclist and me. It's the William Hill Sports Book Club. The Escape has been written by brilliant sports writer David Walsh and Pippa York, who in the 1980s and 90s was Tour de France cyclist Robert Miller before transitioning over 20 years ago. And the book covers that transitioning in depth in the first 100 pages. There's a very deep conversation between the two of you about how others deal with it when someone transitions, those close to you, how they deal with it. And there's a lot of really fascinating stuff. There are lots of pages and words devoted to the transitioning process. There's a lot of detail about it. It includes details of the operations as well. Among the conversations is the standout line from Pippa on page 291 in conversation with David. And the line is, the bike saddle is definitely not a sex toy, which I'm going to leave that one hanging, OK? We won't get into that. I'm going to leave that one hanging. Just another example of how funny this book can be. It's a very private thing, Pippa, the decision and the process. So why have you made it all public in the book?
I don't know. I think I find it interesting. So the whole kind of transition thing and being part of that group that people identify as and called transsexual, there's a kind of fascination of how everything works from then on. And nobody kind of really talks about it with any kind of seriousness, but you have to be kind of serious about it because it's medical procedures, but it's also quite funny.
But there's also a difficulty, people talking about it because they don't want to say the wrong thing, when actually we need an open conversation, don't we?
Well, David always said the wrong thing. He quite often said the wrong thing, and I just went, that's fair enough. There isn't. I think I warned you straight away at the start when you wanted to ask me questions about transition. I said, David, there's nothing that you can ask me that somebody hasn't asked me already, and that goes from the sublime to the ridiculous. And it's the same. So in the book, I tried to kind of explain that people will ask you things that they wouldn't ask their mother or their sister, but it's okay to ask me because it's almost as I've been part of that group, so you'll be okay with telling us what it's like in this group. And sometimes I'll explain, what they want to know, and sometimes I'll just say, no, you can't ask me that. But there's certain things you can try and explain with a bit more humour and a bit more kind of lightness to it.
I think there's something I've got to read from the book, which is and it's a note I made in the book actually. On page 265, you two have met Klaus and his wife at a hotel whilst covering the Tour de France. Now Klaus talks to David, ignoring his own wife, not realising Pippa knows so much about cycling. Pippa afterwards in conversation with David says this, quote, "We, the two women in the room you're talking about, we are not relevant. That's one of the things I learned when I transitioned. Males expect females to be quiet, to just listen. You don't have an opinion, you don't have any experience." And the note I posted in that page says this, fascinating line, "We could learn so much from those who have transitioned about attitudes and behaviours." Would you agree with that?
Yes. So in that kind of social sphere, I've went from the top of the tree, so sporty male. I mean, it doesn't get any better. Even for everybody that's kind of done any kind of sport, they imagine themselves as at the top level of that sport. So you go from that. You don't get any better than this. You were a top sports person to the bottom of the below average, undesirable female. So you go from one extreme right to the bottom of the other. And it's kind of quite difficult to have any kind of worth then, because you go from being this respected person to this, you're just ignored, because why would we want your opinion? You
literally were ignored. That
Yes,
night, weren't
you
you?
were
I mean,
ignored.
it was compounded by the fact that Klaus was really into his bike, right? He had gone with his partner to see a bit of the Tour de France and to ride the big mountains during the days he was there. He's at, outside this restaurant. We're eating kind of outdoors. It's Albertville. It's a nice town and nice part of the world on a lovely summer's evening. And he looks across, and this occasionally happens in my case. And he recognizes me, not Pippa, and he says, "Are you David Walsh, the journalist? I read your book, blah 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 blah." And he starts on. And as soon as he recognized me, then the two women get completely ignored, as Pippa says. And at first, it's kind of slightly flattering for me, so I engage with him. And then I get really bored really quickly, because this guy is he doesn't want to tell me that he read the book. He wants to tell me that he was recently coaching the Turkey under-23 cycling team, and how great a coach he was, but they wanted to do doping, and he didn't want to do doping, and he was a great guy, and he was going on and on and on. And I eventually look across at Pippa and I say...
That was to get out of it.
Yeah, it really was to get out of it. I say, can I tell him who you are?
Please save me. What was
It's a great get out, isn't it?
Yeah. And Pippa says, yeah, tell him. So I basically take out my phone and I do.
You had to do the wiki page.
Wikipedia page. And I reach across to Klaus and I say, "Do you recognise this person?" And he's now reading Pippa's Wikipedia page, and he's looking at Pippa, and he's seeing Robert Miller. And he's completely flummoxed, right? And this is where ignorance takes over. He's looking at Pippa, and he's feeling vulnerable because he doesn't have an answer for this. So he says, hold on. He said, "I can explain what happened here," right? As in what happened to Pippa. He said, "It was all those drugs you took as a cyclist that has turned you into a woman." Now I want to hit the guy, right? And I look across at Pippa, and Pippa's totally unaffected. She doesn't get angry. This guy says the most crass thing that any human could utter, and completely illogical, irrational.
And remember,
beyond stupid.
And his wife sank down in the chair.
She sank, yeah.
So she was getting lower in the chair as she went on.
Yeah.
Goodness me. I mean, were you unaffected? I mean, in the book, I think there's a little giveaway that it did. You weren't happy.
I recognised that Klaus's situation. It didn't really affect me.
No, honestly, it didn't.
It didn't. It was. I heard him say it, and I just thought, "Oh, here we go again," because I've already heard that one.
And I'm saying to Pippa, "Did you not want to punch the guy?" And Pippa's saying to me, in a very kind of somber way, "Do you think that's the worst I've ever heard?"
Yeah, but that's a common theme, is it? That
common? No, I wouldn't say common, but it happens. There won't be a year goes past without somebody saying that to me.
So hang on. Okay, you admit in the book that there were times in your career that you were doping, but there's loads of others who doped and they're not women. So
no.
It makes no sense whatsoever.
It makes no sense.
And Adrian, the thing about the stuff that athletes take, they take male hormones to make them stronger. You know what I mean? It's like...
So you didn't dope that much then?
Well, obviously not enough.
I don't know, top 5 in all 3 Grand Tours, was it? I think, is that right?
Yeah.
Maybe if Klaus had been, in charge of my career, I could have done better. The thing was that I really enjoyed when Klaus recognised you, and it was you in the situation of having to deal with a fan. So for me, it was. I sat there and thought. At first, you were okay with him.
I was, yeah. It was.
And then I saw you lose interest, but you still had to keep feeding him in. So David had to, when he interviews, he just kind of lulls you into the sense of tell me more, and you kind of kept feeding him just enough, so he just kept going on and on. And the whole that he was slowly digging got bigger and bigger and bigger.
And the whole that I mean, you know, when you
were getting angry.
When you meet somebody and they seem nice and they say, "Oh, I read your book." Oh, we have a starting point here. Be careful what you wish for.
Definitely. Much earlier in the book there's a thought-provoking line. It comes after a very funny exchange between you two when you're parking a car in a field. Pippa seems to know where to go, where to park, how to do it. David is baffled by it all, accuses Pippa of guessing. Pippa's great line in response is, "Or did I just figure it all out? You know, the way women do, looking at signs and all that other witchcraft." I was in tears of laughter with that. Superb. And it's a proper ouch moment as well. The line is actually a couple of pages before that on page 26. When you join the female world, you realise that men think they run the world, but women know they do. We just let the men go on thinking that they do. Now, I read this line to my wife, Amanda. She instantly looked horrified and said, "Pippa's given away our secret power." I mean, the male-female dynamic. I think it's brilliant, the way that's written. Klaus is a great example of that. He thinks he's running the show and clearly hasn't got a clue what's going on. But, I mean, when it comes to control and power, are men really... We're guilty, aren't we, really?
No, you have to understand the kind of social interaction of what each person needs to keep the other kind of contented. So as a female, you understand that the man has to kind of fix things and run things and be in charge. And as in the female world, you're the one that kind of cleans up the mess. Well, not cleans up the mess, but kind of smoothes the edges of it. So it all kind of runs smoothly and nicely. And when people get upset, you kind of calm them down and get everything back to the way it was.
Since I read my wife that line, every single message she sends me, I'm analysing from that point of view, though. So the last message she sent me was, "When you get back, do you want to go for a long walk through the forest with the dog?" And I'm thinking, is she seizing the power here? Is what's going on? Is there a dynamic here?
She's giving you a choice.
Well, she's making it feel like my decision.
But then the thing with it is, when you're given a choice as a man, you have to kind of think a little bit deeper than just yes or no. So is it a choice that you can say no to? Well, sometimes it isn't. And you have to realise that, you know, as your kind of relationship develops, there are times when you don't want to, but you're going to have to, because it's not a choice. There's no question mark on at the end of the question, that kind of reply. What reply you can give? You know, there's just nothing you can do about that. You are going for a walk with the dog.
But are you guilty of doing that thing that we think women do, of saying, "I'm fine," when they're not really fine? Have you started doing that in the last 20 years?
Yeah.
Right.
Fine. Fine.
Clearly not fine. We'll address this later. It's the William Hill Sports Book Club. It's the William Hill Sports Book Club. Pippa York and David Walsh have together written The Escape, and it's the subject of this episode. One of the golden rules with the book is make them laugh and make them cry, and the book absolutely does that. One of the most extraordinary moments in this or any book I've read is when Robert Miller discovers his mum has died after she was only in her 40s. Robert was away getting his career going and wasn't told by the family until after the funeral. I think it's a subject that should be left in the book for the reader to discover. So if it's okay, I think we'll just leave that there because it's such a powerful thing. But I just want to focus on some of the lighter moments in the book because there's so many of them. And you picked out a couple. The jar is one you want to talk about.
Yeah. The jar is just funny, is the jar story. Because I'm reading it and I'm thinking, I fell for it. And I thought, you silly bugger.
Just explain what it is.
I'll let David explain it.
Well, I'm like the guy in the car. Before Pippa and I went on our first Tour de France together, I knew nothing about transition. I'd never met a trans person. I'm clueless. And I decided that gave me the right to pretty much ask any question. So we got into stuff that was, that I found really, because I was learning all the time, coming to an understanding of the experience that Pippa had been through. And the last part of the experience was Pippa having the surgeries done in the Far East, genitalia surgeries. And I say to Pippa, like, what do you do with, like, the bits, like, for example, the penis? I mean, and Pippa said, it's really interesting you should ask that. She said, people do ask about it. And I said, well, what happened? And Pippa said, well, the morning after I kind of recovered from the surgery, Dr.
Chetawut,
who's from Thailand, right?
They're from Thailand.
Yeah, a really good surgeon, young, he's done this surgery many times. And he says to Pippa, what would you like me to do with the penis? And Pippa said, well, as Pippa told me, she says, well, do whatever you like with it. And he says, well, I'm Buddhist, and in our culture, all body parts are sacred, and we wouldn't just like
and you have to go
flush it down the sink.
You have to go to the afterlife, with what you came with.
Yes, so it's a big deal. And I say, so what happened? And Pippa said, well, I asked him, and Dr. Chetawut said that he'd put the penis in a jar, like an ornate jar, nice jar, in formaldehyde to preserve it. And I said, and like, what happened then? And Pippa said, well, I asked him, what should I do? And Dr. Chetawut said, well, Pippa, it's up to you. You can take it with you. You can leave it here. We will dispose of it. And Pippa decided to take it back to England. And I'm in the car and I'm saying, like, what did you do with it when you brought it back to England? And Pippa said, well, it's in our living room, just on the mantelpiece above the fireplace. I said, in the jar, like a formaldehyde, just like floating there. And she says, yeah. And I say, wow. And Pippa says, you were the most gullible effing journalist on the Tour de France.
Amazing. You fell for it. Yeah. I fell for it as well.
People, as soon as you say, well, it's part of this kind of cultural thing of Buddhism, or
sacred body parts.
Your sacred body parts. You should leave with what you came with. So it's and you can see the thing, because everybody imagines using body parts in those little jars, a bit like Frankenstein. I've taken it home because I need it with me for my soul. And he's like, oh yeah.
But after you've read, when we read in the book, it's on the mantelpiece, surely we should all be thinking, it's a joke. I wasn't then. I was thinking, in my mind's eye, I'm like, wow.
Who needs
completely
pictures?
done us there. Yeah, thanks for that. And the other one was when they're portraying each other as cities, I think.
But yeah, when you're describing cyclists as cities.
Cyclists, cities, yeah.
Which I just sat there and I just thought it was brilliant, absolutely
Very clever,
brilliant.
Yeah, really. We'll let the readers get into that themselves. You say in the book that you would have swapped your career to go back and transition age 16. Okay, now, I mean, listen, I told you at the start, I was a Robert Miller fanboy, so you're taking away all my Robert Miller memories there. So, but I totally get it. Well, you were at the age of 16 dressing in women's clothes. You were going out to buy women's clothes at that point, weren't you, I think?
Yeah, before then. So probably the age of, I think, 12, 13, I would start going out.
I mean, what I think about it isn't really important. I really enjoyed watching Robert Miller, so in some ways I'm very grateful. But from your point of view, it's about your happiness. When you think back to Robert Miller's achievements, how do you feel now?
I think he did quite well with what he was dealing with. I didn't meet all my objectives, but I met quite a lot of them. And so I was quite kind of happy with the way it went. But having all that ego and ambition, you always wanted a bit more. You always wanted to you're always trying to prove yourself, because there's always somebody who would, come along and say, well, that wasn't very good or whatever, because you're judged on your last competition. So if that doesn't go well, then the next one, you've proven yourself again. But if it did go well, then you have to kind of match that. Otherwise, you've taken a step back. So I was okay with that kind of atmosphere and being in that world. But is it up to me to judge, how good I was?
But you could look back with pride, and I presume, does that happen, or?
No, I'm not that proud a person. Because I looked at it as a, can I achieve this? And then when I did achieve it, I think, yeah, okay, that's because I did all that work before, and I kind of spent the time learning things I needed to learn. So I didn't think of it, I'm going to be really proud of myself. I'm never really proud.
We were having these conversations in the car, and I was like, that line from Yeats, tread softly because you tread on my dreams. I was a huge Robert Miller fan as a cyclist. I didn't know him as a person because I found him forbidding. But as a bike rider, first time I stood on a mountainside in the Tour de France was the 1982 Tour. I travelled on the back of a BMW 1000 motorbike from Ireland to France. Drove to the Alps with a guy called Tony Kelly, who was a complete on the bike. He was a very good driver, but he was a head case, like 130 miles an hour on all that stuff. But anyway, we waited on the top of the Col d'Aspin, and Robert Miller went past us with a Colombian guy in the lead, and Robert Miller won that day, and it was maybe one of the hardest stages of the Tour de France I'd ever seen, because even since 40 years later. It was incredibly tough stage. Robert Miller won it. And now I'm in the car all these years later, and I'm saying to Pippa, but wasn't being Robert Miller, the brilliant mountain climber, like compensation for the person you couldn't be? Did you not get like fantastic elation and joy from that? And Pippa just looked at me and said, no, I would have been much happier if I'd transitioned at the age of 16. And I just, like, it really struck me. It's like, as fans, we have kind of dreams of who our heroes should be and how happy they should be with what they do. But they own their lives, and they're entitled to see their lives from their point of view. And as fans, sometimes we're a bit unrealistic in the way we look upon them.
Yeah, I take all that on board. That's why I said at the start that, it's not really, what I think isn't really important. But we can still go back and look at the videos of Robert Miller.
Yeah.
Being incredible, flying down a mountain, can't we?
So that whole thing of being in a competition and racing a push bike, all the elements of it I enjoyed. The excitement, the speed, the danger, the kind of interaction with people. If it was abusive or supportive, you learn to enjoy all of that. Because if you don't, one part will start really annoying you. I mean, the only part that probably really annoyed me was the journalists.
Yeah, you, David.
Exactly. But even then, there would be moments I'd have exchanges with them, and as long as they stood up to me, I would be okay with them. Then I wouldn't, discard them. So if you kind of stood up to me and were as rude back to me right at the beginning, then I would be okay with them, because I realised that they had some character to them.
Yeah.
But if you were this kind of, like that American guy that used to come, I won't name him, but he always used to ask me about the American riders. Why are you asking me what they feel like? I don't know. Go and ask them.
Yeah.
And that really, those kind of situations would really annoy me, when they would kind of creep up to you and go, well, how do you feel that they were doing? Did you see what they did?
Yeah.
Straight away it would go to bad, swear words, bad language. Don't annoy me again. You're wasting my time. Just.
And I must say, even then, I think I kind of half understood or had a vague sense of that when Pippa would have told me to F off because she had no time. If I had said, who the hell are you? Robert Miller would have respected that. But I was kind of, blessed are the meek, for they shall be trampled upon. And I was trampled upon.
But you also risk, if you do reply like that, you risk a complete break in the relation.
Yeah,
you don't really know. So,
yeah.
But that's a whole different debate we should have about journalists and sports stars. I must admit, I did read the book In Search of Robert Miller. Obviously, being a Robert Miller fanboy, I would have read that book. However, you refer to that this was a book that came out, maybe 10, 15 years, 20 years ago, maybe? I don't know.
2007.
Was it right? Okay. Blimey. So And it's basically what it says. It was in search of Rob Miller. It was looking for you because you kind of dropped off the radar a bit. I didn't realise the impact that the book had on you until I read this book. And it made me feel quite sick that I'd read it, to be honest with you. But it clearly had a deep impact.
Oh yeah, that was a really bad time, those years after that. I think, for me to kind of process it, I was used to intrusion in my life, so I was kind of used to people, doing strange things and taking from me things that I didn't want to give them, in terms of my privacy. But to have that for your children and your partner is not acceptable. So those whole years where they were suffering, but they didn't really kind of feel they could talk about it, especially my children, that was just awful to learn. So when I learned 10 years later from Lydia, our daughter, that she'd been bullied straight away from it during her school years because that appeared in the newspapers, I was just in tears. It was just awful. It's one of those things that is unforgivable for me. That went over the kind of the line of the privacy that I'm willing to give up as in the public sphere doesn't apply to everybody around about me. So yeah, and then you look at it's somebody else's opinion of me. So it's they would say things in it, and I'd read it and I'd go, well, you haven't talked to me, so you can't know what I think.
Yeah, not the best time, and I think this book makes that perfectly clear. Let's end on a positive because I love the ending of the book. I'm not going to give it away. We've talked about this, Neil. It's a brilliant ending. The very last line, I think, sums up the whole book. So I'll let people read that for themselves. And there's a line in there where you say the story is about a top-level cyclist who just happened to transition, which is fundamentally the story, isn't it? That's it, and it's a very good story.
Yeah, I don't want to be known as the transition person who did something before. If you're going to kind of examine the two parts of my life, I was a cyclist before and now I'm not, and it's okay to refer to both of them. But I'm not. One didn't cause the other, and they have a relationship in it, so that I'm that same kind of person on the inside. If you want to go back to that whole kind of Buddhism and the entire person, if I've still got the mantelpiece thing. But no, they're two different parts of my life which are completely separate, and they don't kind of interact unless I've had a moment of dysphoria in my previous existence.
If ever I'm lucky enough to be invited to your place, I'm going to look at all the jars, that's for sure. Are you happy, very quickly, just to finish off, you're happy with the finished product, the book?
Yeah, I think it kind of tells parts of my life like we wanted to. And I think what's really interesting about it is the humour that we have between us, even though David's, Irish Catholic and I'm a Scottish Protestant, and they're never allowed to mix. So it's a kind of interaction that's really strange that we get on so well. And in those kind of 3 tours we did together, we never really fell out.
Never. And I kind of felt, that line that Pippa has mentioned about, men think they control things, but women actually do. We were the living embodiment of that. Pippa controlled everything that happened in the car.
But you thought you did.
But I thought I did.
That's fantastic. Really appreciate it. This episode of the William Hill Sports Book Club, along with previous episodes, are available on the talkSPORT YouTube channel to watch them, and on the talkSPORT app. Just scroll down in the Outspoken section on the talkSPORT app of the podcast. My thanks to Neil Foggin, thank you very much. And of course, thanks to David Walsh and to Pippa York, really good company. We'll see you next time on the William Hill Sports Book Club.